Have you felt like generators were being done way too fast in your matches recently? You end a chase, get a hook, and there are only 2 generators left because survivors repair 2 of them and 1 is about to be done. Feels like you need to tunnel and camp more than before, or started to replace your meme perks with gen slowdown perks. This has been my experience since the Springtrap patch, and at first I thought that this was purely a skill issue by my part. But after comparing my recorded matches post the release of this killer with the matches I did in the past, it is undeniable that killer is currently harder than it has been in a long while. According to Nightlight, a website that shows the pick rate and kill rate of killers based on community input, the kill rates of the majority of killers have plummeted. However, a community manager has come forward saying that these statistics are not accurate at all compared to their official ones, potentially because Nightlight is counting abandons as escapes. But my feelings regarding DBD becoming much harder had nothing to do with this website. I will be waiting for the developer statistics first in order to see if there is any correlation. So, what could have happened for this? Well, the funniest part is that nobody currently knows exactly why matches have become harder compared to before. In fact, this could all be a placebo. But it's weird how many of us are experiencing this change on both sides. There are various potential ideas as to why this is the case. One of the things that I immediately noticed after this patch is how keeping survivors injured is no longer an issue due to the massive buff that healing perks got, in specific, Botany Knowledge. This was a perk I used before it was buffed, and it came with the cost of making medkits less efficient, forcing you to bring another means of healing yourself, or bring an add-on to increase its charges so you can get one heal. For that reason, I ran Strength in Shadows, as I loved this combo, but it was not optimal. Now, Botany gives you a flat 50% healing speed boost no matter what, which means medkits are fair game, giving you 2 fast heals in the same match with a single medkit. I no longer need any self-healing perk, allowing me to basically never be at risk of being injured as I can heal myself extremely fast, and also combined with the countless of healing perks added and buffed in the game like the buffed Resurgence or the new Aurela perk Do No Harm, you can literally reset under the hook in less than 2 seconds. As someone who has played in a lot of metas, this one feels very similar to the Circle of Healing boon meta, only worse, because now you can reset extremely fast without wasting your time booning. But there are many more factors that make this feel extremely bad. Not only is Botany a free perk that everyone has access to, making it accessible for casuals, it also now makes it possible for someone to heal with a medkit and use a syringe or a styptic later, which benefits from the increased healing buff. And the worst part is that the mangled effect was nerfed, so now Sloppy Butcher is not a popular pick as it was before, and survivors can just wait the mangled out with Vigil or counter it with Botany. Back then, syringes were not as popular because they were rare, but now thanks to the prestige change, I have enough syringes on my Sable and my other mains to play until I get bored of it, and I am not alone. With the bulk blood point spending option and with the insane gains from the anniversary event and Blood Moon events, it's easier to find syringes in Dead by Daylight than in Hollywood Boulevard. Healing is currently very busted, being injured means nothing, and hooking survivors also means nothing, as they can reset under the hook and barely lose any time. So my playstyle of hit and run is severely impacted, as it's basically useless now, and instead, hard focusing a survivor is rewarded instead of playing the macro game. It could also explain why some killers might feel like nothing changed if they always focused on tunneling survivors individually instead of spreading the love. This single change is, in my opinion, the one that I notice the most when playing on both sides. And as a survivor, at no point in the match do I feel any danger of being injured when I can heal myself and my teammates extremely fast. Now, you might think that medkits are busted, but the problem are not only medkits. I went on record saying that toolboxes are stronger than medkits in my bully squad counter video, and I stand by it. Generators are currently flying, and this can be due to various reasons. A very good point I have seen is how now that survivors spawn closer together, it makes the first generator pop very fast, and this makes logical sense, as I have seen more efficient survivors split up at the start into pairs, and it means that at the start of the match, instead of losing 1 generator, you lose 2 and potentially 3 if survivors bring Gen Rush perks. However, as of now, I am unsure if spawn logic is not much of an impact or not, because logically speaking, it also makes sense that survivors spawning separately is even worse. I think the problem of focusing gens at the start is that generator slowdown perks were significantly nerfed, and they usually require you to get a down, like Surge, Eruption, Pop, and Pain Resonance. So, if survivors rush a gen at the start, you basically don't have time to slow those generators down. So in short, it's more of a problem that Dead by Daylight needs to give killers a base kit corrupt instead of changing the spawning mechanics, in my personal opinion. Now, Gen Rushers have been in the game always, so this is not something new, but it's clear that something changed, and my biggest theory as to why this is the case is due to the new AFK crows. For those of you unaware, Behavior massively buffed the AFK crows, which forced survivors to do something useful in order to remove them. Even if you are walking, if the game detects that you are not repairing generators or healing someone, the crows will start appearing. So the game naturally forces survivors to gen rush even in low MMR lobbies, as they can no longer hide since the crows will reveal them, and it also punishes survivors that play for flashlight saves. This is fantastic for solo queue, and you probably noticed how survivors are doing more generators than before, but as a killer, it feels very miserable, as it looks like you are forced to run slowdown perks if you want to have a chance. The game is simply not balanced for efficient survivors, and that is an undeniable fact. The devs have nerfed AFK crows, so this is no longer that much of a problem, but the matches still feel like they are going very fast. Another reason why many players might feel like DBD is currently very survivor-sided is due to Springtrap, because he sucks and cannot compete against good survivors. Springtrap is extremely popular for a good reason, and many players have returned to this game to play him, but as you probably already know, Springtrap is at best a B-tier killer. He doesn't have insane lethality against survivors that are good, his doors can be easily countered now that survivors know what to do, and his projectile attack is hard to use compared to the other range killers. This might make it look like survivors are much stronger, but that's only because we went from Vecna, who was very strong on release, Dracula, who is a top 5 killers in the game, Houndmaster, who is an A-tier killer that many survivors don't know how to play against, and Ghoul, who is an A-tier killer but an S-tier killer on release with how easy he was to play. Playing a well-balanced killer now feels like trash only because now you get to feel how insane the disparity is between S tier and B tiers. This is a problem that has been talked about since the nerf's release, and it's an issue that many of us try to find solutions to. And the final and most important possible cause for matches being overall harder is something that completely changes every single balance change that Behavior has ever made. The Go Next prevention actually worked, and survivors are now taking the game more seriously, proving how survivors are significantly more boosted than they ever were because they are no longer giving up, inflating the escape rates. The Go Next prevention should have been introduced before all the balance changes the devs have done in order to balance the game, because they have inflated the kill rates of many of the killers in the game. Best example is School Merchant. Everyone knows that she absolutely sucks, but to this day, there are still players complaining about her despite Schoolie being basically a powerless piece of trash. So what the devs did is massively nerf her because her kill rate was insane. But had they added the Go Next prevention before that, I am sure that School Merchant would have had a more normal kill rate. This is something that many content creators have said for years. Oddsdarva, True Talent, Choi, and many more content creators voiced this concern for months, and it was something very well known that survivors were the power role at the top. However, what was underestimated is just how much it changes to have all 4 survivors want to play the match instead of trolling and going next on their first hook. And now, it seems like the Go Next prevention mechanic has shown us that all the changes the devs have added to the game in order to favor survivors were not needed as much, because the truth was not that they were weak, the truth was that a lot of survivors were entitled and did not take this game seriously. Think about it this way. Every single time the devs balanced the game in order to make survivors survive more was taking into account all the survivors that didn't care about surviving. Now survivors that want to survive have more insane tools at their disposal, like the 70 seconds per hook state change, which is absolutely insane, or perks like Shoulder the Burden combined with buffed Vigil, which are literally game breaking if you use them right, and nobody complains about it because it's very rare in solo queue. Now of course the dislike ratio of this video will reflect how many survivor mains will want the game to be sided for them, with the only argument being survivors really can't have anything. But what most of them do not take into account is that the more sweaty a survivor meta is, the more miserable killers will become, and this is already something that I have adapted. Whereas before, I could run with some meme builds and play without taking into account hook states, now I absolutely need to tunnel a survivor as fast as possible, counting their hooks and even camping a hook to confirm a hook state if I want to have a chill experience later. Or I can also take the easy route and just play Ghoul and other easy killers in order to win. The only matches that I felt were normal were the matches with goofy bully squads, which I love facing myself. But even in those matches, and even while playing well and constantly hooking survivors, most of the time there was only one generator almost being done left, or straight up, we have reached the endgame. So the easier it is for survivors, you have to understand that the more acceptable it will become to tunnel and slug, because those are the only tactics that allow me and many other killers to have any chance at making the match last more than 10 minutes against survivors that are good. Now let me get something out of the way quick. I am not complaining that the game is completely unplayable, because it isn't, as I am still able to win because luckily the majority of solo queue simply sucks in terms of skill. I am also not saying that I do not enjoy a game that is hard, because I like my matches not being snooze fests. The issue is that it is very possible that the game will be made harder, as we know the devs are planning it. According to a leak, in the next Chaos Shuffle event, survivors will get both Tenacity and Unbreakable as base kit, which makes it so that they have 6 perks in total, while the killer does not get anything to compensate. This might seem like an attempt by the devs in order to bring back the slugging countermeasures, when slugging is absolutely necessary against bully squads and the game is unwinnable if you don't slug. However, take this information with a grain of salt, as this was data mined, so it's not official until the devs confirm it. However, in terms of official things, we know phase 2 of the quality of life changes have a lot of them aimed to make the survivor experience better, like anti-camping, anti-tunneling, and anti-slugging. But these are all needed tactics if you want to have a chance at winning in the current meta against survivors that are decent. Or how about the other change, which is buffing maps into becoming windows of opportunity as items? If done, it basically means 30% of the player base will be able to have 5 perks, since Windows is by far the most used perk in the game. Now, for streamers and creators like myself, where playing DVD is basically our job, this is not a problem. But to ask normal killer players to adapt to these changes is asking for way too much, and we need both roles to be fun to play. Behavior is currently at a very weird spot, as for the first time in many years, I would say we are in a meta that is absolutely survivor-sided currently overall, because even A-tier killers feel like B-tier. It's not just my killer bias talking, it's the first time in a long while where I enjoy playing survivor instead of playing killer, which is absolutely crazy for me to say. So I am very curious to see what Behavior is going to do about this, and more importantly, if they are able to share statistics after this patch in order to see if this is a global experience that is affecting both low and high MMR. In my opinion, at the very least, Botany Knowledge should receive a nerf back again, because this perk is absolutely crazy. I said it on my video covering the changes. I used this perk before the buff and it did not need any buffs at all. Another perk that needs fixing is Vigil, as it's very unhealthy after the buffs and bugs that made it much stronger than it was before. See if the game becomes more bearable after these perks are nerfed. If that is not enough, my second suggestion is that now that survivors spawn together, I would seriously reconsider adding an effect based on corrupt intervention as a base kit for killers in order to help them in the early game, where killers are by far at their weakest and where survivors can just rush in order to guarantee 3 survivors escaping, which is what has been happening in the majority of my survivor matches. I think that change is much more player friendly than slowing the generators down, as seeing the red bar just feels bad psychologically compared to having generators blocked. If those changes are not enough, I would seriously consider waiting on implementing the tunneling, slugging and camping mechanics. We don't know what those changes are yet, but if those changes are as impactful as base kit borrow time and make it harder to tunnel and slug, I will not like them at all. And do not get me wrong, it might seem that I am complaining about the go next prevention, but on the contrary, I like it and my solo queue matches have become significantly better. I also would rather play against survivors that try, instead of having killer matches that are boring because survivors gave up and now I have to decide whether to let the last survivor escape out of pity. I want the game to be balanced around survivors trying, because I think that is overall the healthiest outcome possible for Dead by Daylight, and I think the go next prevention is by far one of the biggest buffs the survivor role has ever got in the history of the game. Please let me know if your experience is similar to mine, and if you have any feedback that you want to give to the devs. I will be reading the comments on this video, as I want to see if my viewers are also having this issue. As always, thank you for watching and have a nice day.